I'm the old man. Jess is the younger man. I'm not going to even call him young man right now,
Mm.
but he is the younger man. I'm going full speed ahead. He's having trouble staying awake. I mean, it's just 2 hours of podcast. Come on. At your
Listen,
age,
listen. I know. I lead a young adults community group now, and that was a bit of a moment where I realized I'm not a young adult anymore. I turn 40 next year, which
my
is
youngest son turns 40, and my oldest grandson just turned 15.
yeah. So you want to talk about not having sleep? I have three kids, one who's about to start driving. So I have
They'll keep me
reasons.
up at night, too.
I have reasons that I'm not sleeping. You, not so much. Okay. So
I work. I just work. You are at the Church Answers podcast. If you're wondering what this informal family conversation was about, this is the Church Answers podcast. And the reason that it was kind of an informal family conversation is because I'm Tom Rayner. This is Jess Rayner. So you got a father-son duo here, and we're going to talk about membership classes. You heard the plug for Cheney. I just want to affirm what the nice lady said at the beginning. They are the accounting firm for the church. They're helping over 1,100 churches and growing all the time. So that's Cheney and Associates, or you can go CheneyAssociates.com and look at them there. You can go on the show notes and click on there. They're find them anywhere. We love Cheney and Associates. By the way, thank you who are listening on your favorite podcasting app. If you can give us a rating and review, thank you. A good review at that. For those of you who are watching us on YouTube, you can subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Tell the world about it. Share it. Let everybody know, because we are providing this ministry free to you because Cheney and Associates is so generous to us, and we thank you for that. So, Jess, we're going to talk about 7 important trends in membership classes. A youngster like you may not realize that for most churches, for churches in America, this is a really recent trend. Or maybe we should say it used to be something in historical churches. Then we went for about a century without it being a significant trend. Now, then they came back. So I'm going to let you just start guiding us on some of these trends that are taking place.
yeah, when you just talked about how you know churches with membership classes or classes for new members were in the minority 10 years ago, that
Mm-hmm.
that to me was a shocking statement. Well, one, I grew up with the guy that wrote High Expectations. I grew up with the guy who wrote I Am a Church Member. So
True.
that has been in my DNA, and so I do understand that mindset and that perspective I have. But it's still it even in the circle of churches and pastors that I've known over the years, that has just been the norm. And so
Yep.
the fact that it used to not be this way is shocking, is a bit dramatic. It's surprising. That's a better word. It's surprising to me. So can you give a little bit of background? Like you said, it happened and there's 100 years. What? Why weren't churches doing membership classes and bring us up to date?
I think one of the primary influences on not having membership classes was the rapid growth of the Southern Baptist Convention. Even before I was a Southern Baptist, I mean,
Okay.
it was growing rapidly, even in the 50s and the 60s. Southern Baptists then and now, for the most part, are really, really independent. They're very congregational, and they resist anybody telling them to do something that there's a higher authority within the church system. And so what happens was there's a sense that God has called us, He has saved us. Uh, we place our faith in Him, we receive the free gift of grace of salvation, and it's all coming from Him, and it's free. And that's one of the good things about the historical Southern Baptists. And this is not about Southern Baptists, by the way, but that's one of the good things about that. And it is that sense that drove them into missions for a season and evangelism for a season. Not there now in evangelism, but that happened. And in the midst of all of that, the sense of the freedom that we have in Christ, the autonomy of the church, the freedom that we have in our salvation, that there are no works involved, transferred to the freedom we have as being a church member.
Okay.
And that's really what started. It wasn't just Southern Baptist, but it was the most influential. And let me tell you what happened when I introduced the concept of a church membership class to my church in Birmingham, Alabama. The concept of it, not doing it. So I was a pastor. This is back in the 90s, 92, 93. and I started talking to my deacon buddy about having a membership class. I could tell that they were not really excited about it, but they wanted to be supportive. Started talking about it informally to church people. Next thing I know, I have a small controversy on my hand.
Hmm.
And the controversy became evident in many churches when they started introducing the controversy is this. How can you tell someone that they have to go through hoops to be a member of a church when Jesus said salvation is free? I heard
Okay.
that so many times.
Okay.
Now, there was an underlying meaning to it too, though, Jess.
Yeah, I'm
It
saying there's a
wasn't just, there
strong
wasn't
connection
just,
between salvation and membership here.
well, it was. Then there's this underlying thing that I would later discover. They, the members of these churches that resisted, thought that they were going to have to do some new things to become a member.
Okay.
And we can get to this later. Therefore, I started suggesting to churches that they grandfather existing members, just grandfather them.
Yeah.
Let them in, bring all your new members in, and you find ways to maybe have them participate in the new members class by being a host or something, and then it can spread. But I tell you what, it was resisted greatly. When I wrote the book High Expectations, and I'm thinking it's 1997, I don't have it in front of me, but when I wrote that book, I got a call from the editor, and the editor said, "You sure you want to publish this? It's not going to go well."
Hmm.
I mean, that's how concerned he was that I was writing a book about expectations.
Okay.
You know, it's kind of ironic because I'm a church member. 2 million books later, it's the thing that everybody wants. But high expectations, man, they wanted me to tap the brakes many times. They said, "You're gonna get in trouble for this book." Okay, so that's part of the background.
Okay. So
The other part of the background is, and I don't know why, but I can say this: many Reformed churches started adopting some type of entry point, usually a membership class. And as the Reform movement grew, so did the membership classes. So there were two things that were going on that caused it to come into mainstream. Mainstream may not be the right word, but it caused it to come into the plurality, maybe the majority of churches in America.
okay. So the void existed, if I'm hearing you correctly, because people didn't want expectations on them.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So at some
Absolutely.
point along the way, the church got away from expectations.
Yes.
Would this have a generational connection? Would this have a boomer connection in that, it's kind of the have it your way generation or not? I'm
Absolutely, it did.
okay.
The builder generation was still very much a free will generation, the ones that preceded the boomers. So they were pretty much free will. We went to World War II. Actually, the greatest generation went to World War II. We fought for our freedom, and so they weren't strict, but there were different reasons for it. There was a sense that we fought for our freedom and we want our churches to be free, if you can understand where I'm going there. And then there was the other sense that we want church to be our way. And it's the Burger King church.
Okay.
Have it your way commercial goes way back.
And so a membership class would be a easy way to begin to put expectations on it. And so there was resistance during this period of not having a members class because of that. Am I saying that correctly? It's because this is all new to me.
You're definitely saying it correctly. And
Okay.
what has been amazing has been the transformation in a relatively short time where you don't even hear it as a controversy anymore.
Right. Yeah. Because now the only thing I do hear from time to time, and maybe you can say this was one of the reasons the void existed. It's the biblical question.
Mm-hmm.
Does the Bible say that there should be church members? So that now is the only thing, but that's more theological based, and because maybe that has to do with some of this, returning back to some of these mainstream membership classes. But did that exist? Going back to the void, did that mindset exist as well, or was it just purely I don't want expectations on me?
It was more the former than the latter. It was more I don't want expectations. But we did hear, is membership really biblical? And
Okay.
we heard that some. That wasn't the big issue. I heard that more with the book I Am a Church Member. In fact, I was listening to a radio show. I'm not going to give the name of the pastor. You would recognize him. And he said, now talking to the pastor, the radio host said, there's this new book out by Tom Rainer, I Am a Church Member. And I thought, and you've been speaking favorably of it. He said, no, wait a minute. Hadn't I heard you say that church membership is not biblical? And he kind of had a presidential candidate equivocation, just didn't, kind of went all over the place. But ultimately he said, I may not agree with the label, but I agree with the concept.
Okay.
So
Okay.
whatever that was.
Okay.
And that was when I knew that, okay, this whole idea of new membership classes and membership, 1 Corinthians 12 membership, not civic club or country club membership, is
Right.
catching.
Right. Okay.
That's too much. That's too much background.
You estimate 6 out of 10 now.
Yes.
Churches have membership classes, and so we're looking at the trends of what has caused a shift. I would say a positive shift. I do believe having a membership class and clearly defined membership expectations are really important. What would you say, looking at our first trend of the 7 that we're going to look at? What has been the most biggest and significant change with the membership trends that have shifted?
The fact that membership includes expectations and not just information, and that may sound counterintuitive to you. Well, in the purpose of the class to deliver expectations? No, they started off with just information. Here's our pastor. Here are our ministries. If you want to join, you can do this. If you want to do this, you can. But it was very low key, low expectation. The biggest shift is that you can see in most classes today is there's much or more emphasis on expectation just as on information in the church.
Okay, I want to get that in just a minute because that is our second trend. The first trend we are looking at is membership becomes more meaningful and beneficial. And so this idea that membership has meaning, obviously you can make the case, is it biblical, is it not biblical? Meaning, but then there's also this beneficial side. That word is what really I gravitate towards. So what is it about membership that's become beneficial that's created this positive trend for more churches doing membership classes?
Oh, it's this the big picture of this, the umbrella of it all is you get to be a part of something greater than yourself that's making a difference. I mean, that's the big thing.
Okay.
That you are in this movement. You're a part of a church that is part of a greater movement. That's part of a greater movement for the kingdom of God. And once you get into this, you are really making a difference. That's why it's appealing to certain generations more than the boomers. Boomers didn't want to make a difference. Generally, they wanted to be served. And
you really give the boomers a bad rap. There's redeeming qualities in there.
well, there's some redeeming boomers, but that's the general qualities of the. I mean, look. I could tell you all these developments that took place because of my generation that are not good, but that's not the point. The point is the boomers brought us self-serving mentality that infiltrated the church.
Okay.
And it's still a problem today. When you have a critic in your church, most of the time that critic is not getting something their way and they get mad about it.
Sure.
That's the boomer influence.
Right. But now we're seeing membership classes have meaning and benefit. And I love this too, because one of the things I talk about in my new members class that I have at my church is you can get so caught up in the expectations and it could feel heavy. You can feel like, oh, I need to do all these things or I'm called to do all these things. And I go, but think about this. When you have other like-minded brothers and sisters in Christ that you have chosen to lock arms with, what happens then is when life hits, right? When you stumble, when you fall, you have someone there to pick you back up because you have made a commitment. You have made a commitment to each other. And that's what I emphasize a lot. This is a commitment to God and a commitment to each other. And we need that. Like the church needs that level of commitment so that when hard times hit, you can be picked up. And the same thing is you get the joy of picking a brother or sister up in Christ.
As
that
we
to
are
me is that beneficial side of church membership.
As we are recording this, Florida and North Carolina have been through 2 horrendous hurricanes, Lane, and my mind's gone blank. What's the second one? Milton, yeah. Senior mind. And the devastation is absolutely amazing in the negative word. But who was the first boots on the ground in both states? It was the churches. Even before any of the emergency crews rose, they were there helping people. Right. So that's what you're a part of. You're a part of something greater. That's the big thing more than
something
anything
bigger,
else.
And it does. It happens on a national global scale, but also has on a personal life scale. Um,
Absolutely.
even just at church, I had a knee surgery recently, and I had there was church members who came and said, "Here's a meal. You know, we're going to help you out." That kind of level is just across the board, from small to big. The level of membership, and the
Oh,
meaning of that.
I got another story for you though that's
All right.
related to you. This is related to you and your family. I have a book coming out in 2026, uh, tentatively titled something more. That's probably not going to stick,
Okay.
but basically, it is why church is good for you and the benefits, if you will,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
of church.
Yeah.
I start off with the story of Will.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about you found out that that your son that you thought was going to just come into this world all healthy. And then you found out he was going to be born just a couple of weeks later and he was not going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm given the story of Rachel in the hospital, you standing or you sitting next to her. I'm in another chair, your mother's in another chair, and we're watching people from the church come in and out. Your church come in and out. And I said this, I said, Jess and Rachel have always been servants, and they still are. Now they're experiencing the other side of it where they are being served. And
Yeah.
that is a beautiful picture of the body of Christ. It's a longer story, but I didn't even know I'd written the book. And so I'm now rereading it. I wrote it like 3-4 years ago. And Tyndale said, "You don't remember this?" And I said, "No, send me the manuscript." So they sent it to me. I'm saying, "Man, this is good. This is good. Good story."
There's some yellow flags that are beginning to surface here. I want to make sure you don't remember you wrote a book. Oh gosh! So we're looking at trends of what has happened recently with new members class. And the first one is membership becomes more meaningful and beneficial. The second trend that we're seeing just in the short time is this move from information to expectation to assimilation. All right, explain that. What do you mean when you say membership classes have moved from information, and you mentioned this briefly, and I want to come back to it, information to expectation to assimilation?
When I wrote the book, High Expectations, I really wanted expectations to be the heart of it. But for a season, maybe 2 or 3 years, churches adopted the information side of it. We're going to have a new member class to tell you what our church does, who our church staff is, where our facilities are located. Here's our calendar. Here's why we do what we do. Here's our vision statement. Here's our mission statement. Just a list of information, which is better than nothing because at
Right.
least you're finding out about the church.
Right.
Then the next phase started entering subtly, but not too slowly. And that was the expectation stage. And that is, hey, you're a part of a body of Christ. And according to 1 Corinthians 12 and other passages, if you're not doing something, if you're not doing something for the greater good of the body is going to be sick and could even die. So you're supposed to be a healthy part of the body. That's where we get the word membership. You're supposed to be a healthy member of the body.
Mm-hmm.
And you're supposed to be doing things that not only are just checkoffs to help other people, but they're meaningful for you because you're making a difference personally and corporately being the larger church as well.
Right.
So we went from information to now we're talking more about expectation. Then the thing that is taking place right now, we're still in the early stages of it, is assimilation is beginning to take place in the membership class before people actually leave the class.
Okay.
And the most common thing is getting them in a group. Just getting them in a group. So now they're being assimilated. We'll talk about another thing that's become kind of common. I'll be getting ahead of myself if I do that. But the whole idea is before they leave that membership class, they learn about it. They know what's expected of them. And here's the first step you can take. Let's do that right now.
Okay. So information to expectation to assimilation. Why do you, do you think it's a good trend? And if so, why?
Totally a good trend. Absolutely a good trend because all three are necessary. I mean, you want to know the what,
right?
And then that's the information. You want to know the why. Why do I do what I do? And that is the expectation. But you also want to know the when. When do I do this? And hey, you can start right now. So I've never said those three before, so I probably won't remember it. So those, they're all important, and I think we're getting to a very healthy stage of where the church is going to be. maybe that'll help churches around in America. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I again, having done membership classes for many years now, I have followed this pattern in my own church. It simply started as an information, here, pass along information. Then we started emphasizing the expectation more. I had information and expectation in our membership class from the beginning, but I emphasized information over expectation. So we had both. What I've done recently is, as a part of our assimilation process, I've changed the purpose of the information and the expectation. It used to be the finish line. You go through this process. The new members class, or the membership class, was the finish line where we gave you the information, the expectation, and we said, congratulations, you've done it. Well, now what I tell people is our members class is your launching point. You've gone through this process. You've finished the class. You align with the governance. You align with the theology. You're committing to one another. You're committing to God that you're gonna live out what is said in 1 Corinthians. Now what we've done is says, now go. And so from our members class, our members, their expectation is to assimilate and themselves and help others assimilate. And so we emphasize three things with our members: is discipleship, leadership development, and missions.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to develop our members first in terms of discipleship, because we want them to be the primary disciple makers. We're going to develop them as leaders because we believe our members are going to hold the highest leadership roles in the church. And two, the expectation is to assimilate, is go and to share the gospel. And so we have put more emphasis on our membership because of the information expectation. We put more of emphasis to actually do assimilation. So
I love that trend. You didn't know you were a trendsetter, did you?
I didn't, but hey, glad I could be in these trends. So these first two, in my opinion, are foundational. We've looked a little bit at the historical aspect of what's happening with member class, the new members class. These first two are trends are foundational. Memberships become more meaningful and beneficial, and then we've seen a move from information to expectation to assimilation.
I actually wrote a sequel to I Am a Church Member called I Will.
Yep.
And it got off to a fast start. I mean, it was, I think, 250, 300,000 unit sales. It did really well. And the purpose of it was just simply to say, now that you're a member, so what? Mm-hmm. Well, you don't have to do that anymore. So now it's evident that when you talk about membership, the so what takes place. But I wrote that book because it was not self-evident. So that's why one book's still going hot and the other one is not so much.
It looks like you have to write another one that you don't remember you wrote. So we're looking at these trends. We've gone from historical to foundational. These last five, and I think we'll probably move a little bit faster with these. These last five, to me, are very practical in nature when it comes to the actual class itself. So we're gonna look a little bit more from the foundation to the practical. Our third trend is the length of the class shortens and then stabilizes. So give us some background of what was it and then what is it now, and what do you mean that it shortens and then it stabilizes?
The typical length of a class was multiple days. So whatever that would be. We were members of a church in Brentwood, and I think we went 4 consecutive weeks, and one night, like 8 hours, if you will, 2 hours for a night for 4 consecutive weeks. And we did, we got information and then we took some inventories to find out where we were gifted. And then it was a lot of stuff. Well, we got information over well. I would ask people in that class, do you remember what we talked last week? No, I can't remember anything. It's just so much here. Well, the point is, retention doesn't happen that easily if you try to compress everything into just a very short time, if it's a lot of stuff. So what happened is churches got wiser and they began to say, let's just give them the basics. They will learn more. And so we can give them digital stuff as well. We can give them books, but let's don't make it where we're going to lose half our class by the 4th week. So what happened is the days really shrunk from 3, 4 to 1. And it became one day. And then from 4 hours in an afternoon, like a Sunday afternoon or something like that, it is more common now to, I'd say 90 minutes is the 2 hours is the most common time because it works with who we are. You're not, somebody says, well, you can't teach them everything in 2 hours. Well, you can't teach them everything in 8 hours either. You've got to
Right.
be selective.
Okay.
So it is a pragmatic move, but it was the right move. So they've gone from multiple days to multiple hours, as much as 4, now to one. This is just intuitive. I can't prove it anyway, but 1 sounds short for some reason to try to get everything done. But two is more typical now.
No, I again, to me, I've that's been my trend as well. I was serving a church prior to the one I'm at now, and it was a 4-week process with 1 class a week. And now at the Church of Spring Hill, we budget 3 hours for our membership class, but it's typically 2:15 to 2:30
Okay,
as we get everything
which is
done.
pretty where we are.
Which we've slimmed it down. We've taken some things out. We've made it more efficient, I think, but we haven't really lost. Now, the question, if someone is thinking about a membership class and how they do it, and they're thinking, well, doesn't it make more sense to do 4 2-hour classes? Because if you're going to raise the expectation, if you're going to make this a big deal, if it's going to be meaningful and beneficial, so how do those go together between the lessening of the class but the raising of expectation?
One thing that has happened with these membership classes is they used to be a graduation ceremony, if you will,
Okay.
and you're done, kind of like you say. Now it's more of the start line. And so now that you've done this, what is going to take place? And so the leader of the church, the pastor, and other leaders, they are saying, our purpose is, and it is reflecting back to that membership class. It's the redundancy and the importance that again and again contributes to the fact that it goes beyond the days of the membership class.
Okay.
When I would discipline you, I could discipline you for one thing, and if unless I just beat the snot out of you, which I never did, please hear me, everyone. But if I punish you for one thing, you might remember it. But if I continuously talk to you about something and say, about this and that, it begins to sink in and it becomes part of who you are. So I shouldn't make a membership class analogous to getting the snot beat out of you, but
I,
I think you get the point.
I was thinking whitewater rafting. That's what came to my mind. Like anytime I've gone whitewater rafting, you sit down, you go through training. They teach you how to do things. They teach you like when I say this, you row this way. Listen to my commands. Here's where we're going to go, and then you get in the boat and go. But you really don't start really understanding it until you get a little bit farther down the river, and it gets harder, and you get more trained as you go. So it feels like it's a little bit of that
It is.
pre-launch. Here's what to expect, which is why it's shortened versus we're going to teach you everything about the river, and when you get in the boat, you don't remember 75% of it anyway. They're trying to teach
Let,
the basics of how to navigate the river.
let me give you some exceptions. There are always exceptions. There are no
Sure.
hard rules. Holland's church in Raleigh, which is a global Methodist church, I think they do 4 weeks. And then you've got Grace Fellowship Church in West Palm Beach, and I think they do 4 weeks. They do multiple weeks. Theirs is centered around the Bible study hour, and they have campus groups. They may have a few home groups, but most of them are campus based. And so they build it into the structure, and at least one of them makes that membership class their community group for a season as well. And
Okay.
they go together. So it becomes, they get into the rhythm of coming every Sunday for the membership class. And then that becomes their community group for a season. Those two, I can tell you, are working. It's an exception.
There are places for that, I'm sure.
Yep.
As long as they're done well. So, but
Well,
in large
they're
part,
done
the
well.
trend that you've seen over the past 10 years is the class shortens over time and eventually kind of reaches a stabilization point of
And
maybe 2 to 3 hours.
2 hours may be between the 1 and the 4, maybe the 2 hours. That's not legalistic, but it seems like that's where it is now.
Okay. Which then goes into our fourth trend. These classes have become a permanent fixture on the church calendar. I might have my reasons, but you start telling us why first. Why is this now a permanent feature Was it not before? Again, I'm coming
No,
from a little bit more of my experience. It wasn't
no.
before. Why is it now?
Usually you form membership classes after the fact. You would get enough people and then you say, okay, we got 10, let's have a membership class. That was more typical for churches. And for some smaller churches to wait to get 10 people could be a year or even a little bit more. So that was the typical pattern. Let's make sure that we have enough people to have a good class. I like putting it on the calendar ahead of time. This is preferential. I even prefer it to be on a calendar on a quarterly basis. Every quarter, we're going to have a new member class. What if no one shows up? No big deal. No one knows about it except the one who was going to lead the class. But what does it communicate? This is important to us.
Mm-hmm.
It's a part of our rhythm. It's a part of who we are. We're always going to have membership classes, and we'll have a membership class if it's one family, one person, or 50. We're going to have it. So that's my bias, I guess, and why I like them to be on the calendar. And that is a bias that is increasing in churches today.
Yeah, it's the continuing to emphasize the importance of what it means to be a member in the local church setting.
Right.
I would add, it's mostly on the calendar for us. I think we do about 3 a year. We don't quite follow a pattern, but we do schedule, I think, 3 a year, and so we always have one coming up, even though it doesn't maybe follow necessarily a pattern. But for the most part, we schedule ours ahead, not knowing how many people are ready for membership. The other side of it, what we do is after the class is done, and there's some requirements we have, and we actually do covenant membership, which I know some people agree, don't agree, but that's what we do. They sign the covenant, they meet with a leader in the church, we hear the testimony. So there's some key things we do post class, but it's usually about 6 weeks after the class, we do a membership presentation to the church.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, having the class on the calendar emphasizes it, but then have another 6-week follow-up presenting the membership has an emphasis, and then the next class is coming again, and so it creates this natural rotation, this natural emphasis on church membership. So that's something we do that kind of helps with that. So that's, to me, the why behind Trend 4, which is classes have become a permanent feature on church calendars, is because it is emphasized by the
Well,
church.
let me say this. I consider myself a pretty active member at our church, mine and your church, where you're pastor. One of the old ones for sure, but a pretty active member, particularly in my community group and in the worship service and in ministry among my community group members during the week. So pretty active. I could not have told you that it was not on the calendar, to put a double negative. To me,
Okay.
it feels like it's on the calendar because
Okay.
it's emphasized that much. So you just informed me something about my church that I did not know, that sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but it feels like it is because you're talking about it
Well,
quite often.
it's always on the calendar. It's just maybe not scheduled in a rhythmic every quarter way, if that makes
Got
sense.
it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So it is there. So it was somewhere in between of what you perceived and what the reality is. So, well, let's look at trend number 5 here, which is in established churches, members who joined before the membership class are typically before the membership class are typically grandfathered in.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to us a little bit about why that is. My guess it has to do with maybe this void that existed, and now in the past 10 plus years, there's been a growth in membership class. Tell us why that is a trend.
It is a trend that it will eventually be minimal. It's still growing a little bit, but eventually it'll be minimal. Now, why is that? Well, the trend is when you start a new member class, if you've never had one before, and there are members there, they think and I could use air quotes, but I know that those who are listening won't see my air quotes, but those who are there before that membership class was started have a perspective of what it means to be a part of the church. And whatever you do with the membership class is going to change what their perspective is. And it might create resentment and it might create conflict. So for many churches, I discovered this after I wrote the book. It's like Simple Church. I discovered some pastors tried to eliminate things and didn't do it well. And so they got in trouble. Same thing with this book. I guess Tom Rainer's a troublemaker writer, but I wrote this book and some people just said, we're going to do this. Well, Deacon Jones said, over my dead body. And the pastor said, that'll be fine. And so they had the conflict. They had the conflict. And that's why these grandfathering things were created. There are ways to get around it. I know some churches will actually have members who came in before the membership class host and be there for the membership class
Right.
and say, come serve, and they hear and they do that. You could do it sermonically. It's not quite as good to do it through the sermon because you're not sure if that person and that person is there for that reason, but there are ways around it. But the grandfathering, I think, is near its peak. It's continuing to grow, but it's near its peak because it's no longer necessary because most churches have it.
So if someone's listening to this podcast, they do not have a membership class and they're thinking, I want to start one in my church, I'm going to make everyone go through it. If not, they're not a member anymore. Would you recommend that or would you not recommend that? Would you recommend this grandfathering? What would be your approach?
I would normally recommend the grandfathering because I've seen the consequences of not doing it. Every context is different. There might be someone with leadership skills and a membership where that works. I don't want to create rules. I just want to create some ways that you can make it happen if that occurs. So that's where I am.
Okay. It comes down to the leadership. It comes down to the shepherd knowing his flock. That's good. So we are seeing that trend that in established churches, members who joined before the membership class existed, they are typically grandfathered in. We got two more here. Again, looking at the practical side of things. Our sixth trend when it comes to new member classes is that many membership classes connect the new members to a small group immediately.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier in the we're talking about information, expectation, assimilation. And one of the more important things to do is to get people in groups.
Right.
We talk about groups all the time. You emphasize groups. You beat your head against the wall to make groups stay healthy. Every pastor that tries to keep church groups healthy in their church, they beat their head against the wall. It is endemic because it's tough. It's just really tough.
It's one of the hardest ministries in the local church. It really
is. It is. But if you do it, even if you don't do it perfectly, what God is going to do through them is absolutely incredible. And I could give a lot of data. I'm not going to give that right now. But the most common way to start assimilation is to have a group ready for them while they are there. Or, you use the process that I mentioned earlier. Let them become a group, if there are enough of them, for a season.
Yep. Yeah. So, one of our expectations as a member is that you are regularly involved in a group. That we have lots of different types of groups in our church. And so we don't put a specific what type of group. We just said we want, as a church member, your expectation is to be regularly involved in the life of a group. And we're not going to sit there and we have typically 3 semesters. Doesn't mean you have to be in a group every single semester, but it is a rhythm of your church life to be in a group. So what we do before we present our members is we ask them what group they're in. And so it's not only is it immediately, the expectation is that you're already doing it.
They've made a covenant to do so, and so you might as well get them in it.
Right. And so it's not immediately, all right, you're done. It's like, well, to finish the membership process, you got to be in a group.
Yes.
And so that level of expectation, or at least sign up one on a roster, make some motion. We're not going to be super legalistic about it, but there's an intentional effort to make sure someone is associated with a group before they actually become a member.
And you can remind your new members that there is one group in the church that meets 48 weeks out of the year. It's the only group that meets 48 weeks out of the year.
That's right. We have about 30 to 36 weeks scheduled for groups.
And then you have the super saints who meet 48 weeks.
48 times a year. Well, I fully expect you to be there, the week before and the week after Christmas. So I want to hear this.
Probably will be, actually. I don't like missing my church.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing. I know we're not talking about how groups are done, but we do all the different varieties. But because of that, because we have some that are semester based, some that are ongoing, some of that are demographic based, it makes it easier to carry out this trend. And so we really do that. So,
I'll say this: what our group does not have is childcare, though, and we don't intend to.
And that, and depending on context, but that you want to talk about the difficult ministries, childcare for community groups in our context is absolutely that's been the hardest thing to plant in a church for me. So, this brings us to our final and 7th important trend when it comes to new members class. And it's connected to what we were just talking about, this idea of getting people plugged into a group. You are seeing that there's a growing trend for new members to become part of the welcome ministry or the greeter ministry or the hospitality team, whatever you call it, for a season. Explain that.
Many times, well, let me just back up. Many churches today are saying your membership class will be completed once you go into a group and you work in the welcome ministry for a month. That's could change the length of time, but 4 weeks. Work in the. Why is that? Well, you're becoming connected and you're getting to know people in your group. But in the welcome ministry, you're getting to know not only people walking in, but you're getting to learn who's coming in, what's happening. And it really tells you a lot about the church. You're getting involved in ministry, but right away, you're getting to see from the perspective of guests coming in. Oh my goodness. Like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we ran out of parking. It was more than 2 or 3 weeks ago at our church, Jess. And I was out there. I watched one car. I got them to showed them where the extra parking was. They weren't looking at the sign right, but the other car left. And I'm thinking, man, I got to do something about this. Well, I had guest eyes, and that really helps. Your new members have outsider or guest eyes, even though they're now insiders. And I know that in many of the churches they're sticking around after that. They start really liking it. And I know that in our church, we have low turnover on the welcome ministry or the hospitality ministry. A couple of other factors. I think there's been a great influence by Danny Franks, especially as smaller churches has looked at his welcome ministry at Summit. I hear a lot about him. And so he's been influential in this world. But the main thing is just a way to they're getting to know people, but this gives them the outsider eyes, which is so helpful in any church.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, it's one of the easiest ministries for someone to serve in for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, going back to what we do, we have the expectation that you're serving in a group before you actually get presented for membership. So for us, that's an easy conversation to have. And people are like, where do I start? Well, I typically say welcome team or kids ministry, because it's always the biggest needs. Kids ministry can have a little bit harder entry point, but the welcome team, your hospitality greeter ministry, whatever you call it.
You have to be cleared to be in the kids ministry. I mean, you can't just have anybody going in there.
If you can smile and hand out a worship guide or bulletin, then you can jump in. If you can put out a few chairs, help people find seats. So it's an easy one to get into. And so I think churches have begun to use that as that, again, going from information to expectation to assimilation. It's the easiest one to get them assimilated because it typically has the lowest barrier to entry. And then when you combine these last two trends, groups and serving, if you can get someone in a group and you get someone serving, they stick. They stick. And so you want your members to be your stickiest people in terms of sticking to the church. Make sure they have clean hands if they're on the welcome team. But make sure they're staying in the church. And those are the two greatest ways to get them plugged in. Well, I like these trends. I'm a fan. I think they're super important. I think as churches move towards this, what do you, as we wrap up here, what do you think is next? Do you have a bit of an understanding of what's going to happen with membership? Do you feel like it's going to keep growing? Do you feel like maybe there's going to be a reverse trend? What's the trajectory, and where do you think it's going to go over the next 10 years?
I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'm going to give you an answer, and you can decide if it's an acceptable answer. What I think is going to happen is you're going to see a lot of strong churches. Oh, I hope they don't hear this the wrong way. Slow down their growth as they strengthen the body.
Okay.
And that strengthening of the body is occurring through membership classes, through groups and all that. And then I see those churches becoming evangelism explosions, to use the OEE phrase. So I think a lot of churches, and I know a lot of churches that are saying, I should grow and I want to grow more, are saying, why aren't we growing more? And I think it's a time of strengthening and inner strengthening for something greater. My fear is if I say that, that becomes a convenient excuse.
Right.
Because I've heard that excuse quite often. We're a discipleship church. Jess, I did a short consultation, not a full consultation, with the church. And they talked about how the pastor had announced his retirement. So I didn't interview the pastor, but they talked about the pastor as one of the great expositors. that they'd ever had, and that he was just fabulous in the pulpit, and he focused on discipleship, and he wanted everybody to get stronger and stronger in the Word, and he took our church from 350 to 28. And now they can't afford a full-time pastor. That's one of the reasons he had to retire early. That's somewhat of a slap, but we can focus so much on getting strong that we're not going, and we can focus so much on going we're not getting strong enough to go. If I'm going to err, I'm going to err on going.
So what I hear you saying, if I could maybe sum this up in my own words, is the membership class is where you can begin to strengthen, maybe without slowing. It's adding a strengthening component already in your assimilation process of the church. So
Right.
where you often feel like focus on discipleship, focus on evangelism, it's going, hey, we're going to, as people come in, we're going to train them to be disciple makers and evangelistic. And so while that might be a season where intentional strengthening, it's going to propel us deeper into these areas that the church absolutely needs. And I think when you look at overall where we're headed, especially in the American context of a church, we need to get stronger. We need to know
In
why
this
we believe
culture.
what we believe. We need to be more effective in the way we share the gospel. We need to be more effective in how we help new Christians, young Christians grow. And so we need a strengthening of the church. And I think that's a good thing. And I think it will result in numerical growth, which I know is not necessarily the goal, but it will result in healthier churches,
Will.
more effective.
That include evangelistic churches and the health. Yeah,
Right.
You got it. Well, thank you for being a part. I almost thought that you were the host, and I was waiting on you to close it up. I forgot I'm the host of this. Thank you for being a part of the Church Answers podcast. And just a word, usually I do a mid-roll, Jess, and I talk about Cheney, and I talk about what a great sponsor they are. We got to talking so much on this, I think I went just right through it this time. So I'm gonna give Cheney Associates just a thank you at the end of this for being our sponsor, for being the church accounting firm. I mean, it's over 1,100 churches trust them, and that's growing every week. So thank you, Cheney, for paying the bills, but thank you for more than paying the bills. Thank you for being a ministry partner. All they do is church accounting, and they can help your church as well. Thank you, audience, those of you listening on your podcast app, those of you who are watching on YouTube. We appreciate you. We'll have an episode every week. They're getting a little bit longer because we're going a little bit deeper. Hope you're enjoying them. We'll see you in the next episode.